Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Educational AD Podcast. We'll be right back with today's guest, but as always, we want to give our sponsors a shout out. Now, please don't hit that fast forward button. These are all companies that I used as an AD or have a direct connection to. You should be using them too. So take the next 3.5 minutes, listen to our shout outs, then listen to the episode, and then go visit these sponsors. You're going to be glad you did. Here we go. We want to say thanks to Huddle for their support of the podcast. Go to huddle.com and change the way you see the game. As a football coach, I used Huddle for years, but when I became an AD, I was looking for a platform that was going to serve all of our teams and coaches, and Huddle came through like a champ. Go to huddle.com. Your coaches are going to love the tools that Huddle provides that helps your program go up to the highest level. Join the 8 million users. Go to huddle.com. Turn your school into a Huddle school. We also want to say thanks to our good friends at Gipper. Go to Gipper.com, the official social media graphic solution for the podcast. Their team's going to show you how to create world-class marketing content in seconds that's going to celebrate your program and promote your teams. Gipper's used and trusted by over 4,000 athletic programs across the country. It's professional graphic design made easy. Mention the podcast, you'll get a nice discount. That's Gipper.com. Check them out today. We also want to thank the Ohio University Online Master of Science in Athletic Administration program for their support. This affordable 20-month online program focuses exclusively on interscholastic athletic administration. And when you finish, you're not only going to have your master's degree, you're also going to have completed 11 NIAAA leadership training courses that can go toward your RAA or your CAA. You'll also be part of a graduate network with connections in athletics across the country. There's no GRE or GMAT required. And to get started, all you have to do is go to ohio.edu/info/MAA. Check it out today or let somebody else in your network know about it. We want to thank Home Campus. Home Campus is the exclusive high school and state association management platform for us. It's also a platform you're going to use every single day. Things like scheduling, student athlete eligibility and clearance. Who doesn't do that every day? Contacting your state association, your coaches, your parents, your kids, uploading rosters, you name it. Home Campus is going to do it faster, better, and it's going to make your job a lot easier. All you have to do to get started is go to homecampus.com. That's homecampus.com. We want to thank Sideline Interactive for their support. Go to sidelineinteractive.com. Schedule a live web demo to see their scoreboards and their score tables in action. Their products not only generate income for your athletic department, they also create the ultimate game day experience for your student athletes. That's sidelineinteractive.com. We want to say thanks to Hometown Ticketing, the leading digital ticketing provider to schools and colleges. I don't think I need to say anything more. Go to hometownticketing.com. It's digital ticketing that offers more. We want to say thanks to Vital Signs Wall of Fame. If you're looking for a really cool way to display your school record boards or your school's Hall of Fame, go to vitalsignswalloffame.com. Check out their interactive touchscreen, that's right, touchscreen video consoles. It's also a great way to share your school's history and your proudest moments. Go to vitalsignswalloffame.com. You're going to be glad you did. We want to say thanks to our friends at Snap Raise. Have you ever spent weeks and weeks with a fundraiser and ended up with little return on investment? Stop right here. Go to snapraise.com. Hands down, the best online fundraising platform out there. We used it at our school with tremendous success. Our coaches loved it. Our parents loved it. And hey, it flat out works. Go to snapraise.com. Check out their other platforms, but if you're looking for a fundraiser, you found it. Go to snapraise.com to get started. And we want to thank Athletic Surveys by LifeTrack. Athletic surveys are going to connect you. They're going to connect you to the parents you already hear from, the ones that want to complain. But that's only a small percentage. They're also going to connect you to the 98% of your stakeholders, including coaches and athletes, that support your program. And that's tremendously valuable information to have when you're talking with a frustrated parent, or maybe your principal, or even your school board. Go to athleticsurveys.com to get started. Let them help you take your athletic program from good to great. Hey, welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Educational AD, and I guess our continuing series with the members of the Florida High School Athletic Administration. Many of these folks I got to know over the years as an athletic director and also while serving on different committees. And today I like to say we're talking with an old friend, Ashton Mosely. Ashton is the Director of Eligibility and Compliance for the FHSAA. And we're excited to have her on the show today. So, Ashton, welcome to the
Hi.
Educational AD Podcast.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Well, you and I were talking. We're recording this on April 1st, April Fool's Day. So it's going to be fairly timely when you're listening to it. It's a crazy busy time, I think, for all athletic directors and state association members with spring sports. So let's go and jump right in. We always like to let our listeners have a chance to get to know our guests. So tell us a little bit about yourself, where you were born, where you grew up. Maybe take us up through your own high school and college days, and then we'll take a break. But what's the Ashton Mosely origin story?
Thanks. I've been in Florida my whole life. I was born in Pensacola. We only lived there for maybe a year and a half, so I don't know much about it from that experience. I grew up mainly in Jacksonville, so go Jags. Um, I graduated from Inglewood High School. The time that I was there, we were not great at a lot of things. So, my knowledge back then of the FHSAA was very limited. I grew up cheering. I did competitive cheerleading almost my whole childhood. And cheer was not sanctioned by the FHSAA back then. I believe it became sanctioned shortly after graduation. But I've also dabbled in a few other sports, swimming, volleyball, and then my senior year of high school, my friends and I all joined the girls golf team. Um, we wanted to be scholar athletes, but since cheer wasn't sanctioned, golf was our next choice. We were not great, but it was a lot of fun. To this day, I still don't know how to golf. So, but that was high school. It was just a good experience for me. Sports played a big role in that and creating those bonds and friendships. And then after that, I graduated and went to the University of Florida, and stayed in Gainesville. And I didn't do any sports in college, kind of just besides recreational and fitness wise. But then I, went to school, got my bachelor's in applied physiology and kinesiology. My plan was to do physical therapy, but then I realized that that's not really what I wanted to do. Um, so I took a little while after getting my bachelor's and, just worked different jobs and deciding on what I wanted to do for the rest of my life. And then I ended up at the FHSAA and got my master's at Liberty University in sport management there. So
Uh,
that's me in a nutshell.
well, we're going to hear about that path that led you to FHSAA in our next segment. I want to go all the way back to high school.
Okay.
Now, as an athletic director, I was very fortunate. I was at 3 different schools in Florida in my 20 plus years in Florida. And at all three, it had either already happened when I arrived or we did it. We embraced cheer and dance as part of our athletic program. And I had great coaches and we had some pretty good programs. So going back to your days in high school, sometimes it can be a stereotype that, cheer is not athletic and all this stuff. What was your experience as a member of the cheer team at Englewood High School?
Yeah. Well, I'm always going to be on the side that cheer is a sport and it is very athletic. It is very dangerous. Um, when I was in high school, like I said, our football team was not great. Our band kind of dwindled. So we actually heard a lot from our fans and our student athletes that like they came to the games to see us. Because we we had more members probably on our squad than the band did at that time. So that was a different experience than I'm sure a lot of people do experience with cheer, because we did have a lot of support and we did have a lot of following. And that made it that much more fun too. And, losing the games on Fridays, that was, it wasn't great, but it made it better that we had supporters there for us as well. And then whenever it came to like the competition side, um, we had great coaches. We loved to perform and not just be there on Friday nights, but have our own competitions as well and be able to travel and that kind of stuff. So it was definitely not the where everyone was looking down on us. It was more of like a uplifting and people loved it.
No, I've heard that so many times, and you're absolutely right. Whether it's the football team or the soccer team or you name it, fans, students, they're going to follow a team that is good. And we've heard it, and we saw it at my own schools with our cheer and our dance programs. They were big, they were well prepared, they competed, and the fans really responded to that. So good for you. Um, on your golf game, I'm telling you this, I'm not that far from Gainesville. So if you need somebody to go golfing with, it sounds like you and I are the same type of golfer. We like it, but we just haven't mastered those skills yet. So, yeah.
I feel like Happy Gilmore in his days where he's not so great. Like I just sometimes get really frustrated because it looks like it should be way easier than it actually is. So major props to all those who are good at it because it is not what it seems.
Yeah. And good for you for back in high school deciding, hey, we're going to be scholar athletes, and you created that girls golf team. Good.
It was
Any memories stick out from that season on the links?
I mean, it was a fun time for sure because it was all of our friends, all of us. I think we were all seniors, and I do remember going to, I want to say it was a meet with Fletcher and just realizing how big golf was to other families that had, these girls were very good at it and they had their parents that would follow them and, take scores for them and really just keep track of everything they were doing, their strokes, everything. And we're walking around there like we don't even own golf clubs. So we were borrowing from each other. So it was eye-opening, but it was also humbling and just a fun experience overall the whole season. I'm sure our coach was probably like, why are y'all doing this? But he was supportive too. He was there with us every step of the way. So
And you were the best girl golfers in the school. So,
I wish I could say that.
yeah. Hey, for our listeners, our guest today is Ashton Mosley. She is the Director of Eligibility and Compliance for the Florida High School Athletic Association. We're going to hear more about that, but let's take our first break. This is the Educational AD Podcast. We want to say thanks to our good friends at Huddle for their support of the podcast. Go to huddle.com and change the way you see the game. As a football coach, I used Huddle for years, but when I became an athletic director, I was looking for a platform that was going to help all of our teams and athletes, and Huddle came through like a champ. Our coaches, our student athletes, even our parents loved the tools that Huddle provided that allowed our fans to experience sports at the highest level. Go to huddle.com, join the 8 million users, and turn your school into a Huddle school. We also want to say thanks to Gipper. Go to Gipper.com. Their team is going to show you how to create world-class marketing sports graphics for your school social media channel. It's going to help you celebrate your teams and promote your program. Gipper's used and trusted by over 4,000 high school and college programs across the country. It's professional graphic design made easy. How easy? It's so easy. even I can do it. Go to Gipper.com to get started. We also want to say thanks to the Ohio University Online Master of Science in Athletic Administration. This affordable 20-month program focuses exclusively on interscholastic athletic administration. And when you finish, you'll not only have your master's degree, you'll have completed 11 NIAAA leadership training courses that can go towards your RAA or your CAA. You'll also be a part of a graduate network that has connections in athletics across the country. To get started, all you have to do is go to ohio.edu/info/MAA. You're going to be glad you did. Welcome back, everybody, to the Educational AD Podcast. Once again, our guest is Ashton Mosely. She's the Director of Eligibility and Compliance with the Florida High School Athletic Association. We're going to hear about that part of your job later, Ashton, but I think it'd be interesting for our listeners to hear about, your journey after college, including your time working on that master's in sport management from Liberty. Can you share a little bit about your journey?
Yeah, I started my master's, I want to say in 2018. So I had already been at the FHSAA for a little while. And I started off really ambitious, doing 3 classes a semester, and quickly realized that was a lot. Especially I had a child at home who was, I think he was 4 at the time. So trying to juggle working full time and then a full load of coursework and being a mom and all that stuff. That was a lot. So I scaled it back to 2 classes and powered through it. It was all online, so that was a plus. We did have the opportunity to attend graduation in person, but I believe that was after COVID, so I did not do that. I decided to stay home and just celebrate with family and close friends. But there were, the teachers there, they were very responsive for online courses. I know sometimes you don't get that. But it was a great experience. Some classes that I really enjoyed were sports law. Some of the cases that we went over, I was like, oh my goodness. Which kind of plays into my role here now. Um, and also sports ethics. I think I still have that textbook actually, and I would love to have the time to just go back and read it because it really just makes you think in different ways and gives you a different perspective of things. Um, so those were 2 of the classes that like really stood out to me.
Right.
And the sports law, like I said, helps me with my role now. And we'll get into that later, but it does make you look at things differently than you would prior to. So I loved it. I'm glad I did it, and I'm glad it's over, but it was definitely a good couple of years, and it was tough, but powered through it, and here I am.
Well, again, your comments about the law courses, we hear that again and again with the NIAAA's leadership courses, and I think they're up to 5 legal courses now. It's the first timers. It's always, oh my goodness, I never knew. And it's great that, again, from your position, as you said, working with eligibility and compliance, yeah, you probably need to know a couple of law things. We're probably drifting into our next segment, but that's okay. I'm the host. I can do what I want to. You mentioned that what you do now with FHSAA, eligibility and compliance. I think a lot of times, and going back to one of the comments you made when we first started, that growing up when you're in high school, you really didn't know much about the FHSAA. I think most student athletes are that way because they only hear about it when there's an eligibility a violation or a problem, and it's not their fault. It's something that an AD or a coach might have done or might not have done.
Mhm.
So the point I'm getting at is education I know is a big part of the FHSA and what you do too. Um, have you, outside of maybe the legal courses, has there been something from that master's program that you're dealing with something on the job and you say, hey, we covered that back in one of my Liberty courses? Anything come to mind? I know I'm putting you on the spot here.
That's okay. It has been a couple years now, so uh I I can't think of a particular instance, but I will say that ethics class also makes you think of different things when we're going through certain situations with eligibility and compliance. You always, you know, we want to think in the best interest of our student athletes, but we also want to have a fair playing field for everyone. So some of the stuff that you learn in there, you kind of translate over into real life. And while, some things are policy and some things are rules, and you look at it and you have to enforce it, but you also look at it like, okay, well, if we keep running into this issue, or if we see something, maybe we need to bring this up to whoever has the ability to change this so that they can look at it and say, okay, maybe it does need to be addressed, because it does seem to be in the best interest of the student athlete when we change something. So in that sense, there are things that translate over, but like I said, I can't think of a particular instance where I'm like, yep, that came from my
Right.
master's.
Well, that made me think of another question. Maybe this will be easier. In our next segment, we're going to take a deep dive into all things FHSA eligibility and compliance. And right now, you are the director of eligibility and compliance, but you didn't start out in that particular position. When you first came to FHSAA, just a quick, review of what you have done at the association.
Okay. Um, yeah, I came to the association in 2017 as the executive assistant for athletic services. So Mr. Justin Harrison was over athletic services at that time, and I worked as his assistant. We dealt with all of the ejections and suspensions of students and coaches from games. And then I did a lot of like the district planning meetings. I helped with all of that. Um, so now I think each administrator does their district coordinator stuff, but I used to do that a while ago. And then state series passes, lifetime passes, that was all part of that position as well. And then just other administrative duties. So I did that for a couple years, and then I moved into the communications department as the public relations specialist. Um, and did that for a couple years. So that entailed like social media, sending out mass communication through Constant Contact, sending out updates for like board meetings and representative assembly and all kinds of stuff. And then state championships, traveling to those, and being the communications representative at some of those state championships. And then after that, I came over to eligibility and compliance. That was, I believe, in 2019. So, or I'm sorry, not 2019. 2019 was the PR specialist. Then I came over here in 2021, I think, or 2022. They all run together.
But it has to have been valuable now, having gone through those other, I don't know what you want to call them, departments or
Mhm.
specialties for the things that you do in eligibility and compliance. I was on sectional appeals, I was on athletic director advisor committee. So yeah, I know a little bit of those workings, but boy, I'm just thinking, having spent time in those different areas, it must have really made your transition into eligibility and compliance a lot easier.
For sure. It gave me a lot of knowledge from all aspects of the building. The only department I haven't been in is finance, and I am okay with that. Um, but it definitely has given me different perspectives and a lot of knowledge just all over the place. So now, a lot of people will call and they'll ask a question that won't be related to my job duties, but I'm easily able to either answer their question or be like, "Oh, nope, that's this person you need to speak with. Give me 1 second." But it also helped me with, my my knowledge of our handbook. I wasn't as familiar with the eligibility bylaws and policies, but I did have a lot of knowledge of other things, that we do see a lot in this role. So it is very helpful, with my job and with communicating with our stakeholders.
Well, you mentioned the policy handbook, what we call the red book here in Florida. So we're going to take that. That's going to be part of our deep dive in our next segment. For our listeners, our guest today is Ashton Mosely. She's the Director of Eligibility and Compliance for the Florida High School Athletic Association. Let's take that break, but when we come back, we're going to take that deep dive into all things FHSAA. This is the Educational AD Podcast. We want to say thanks to our good friends at Home Campus for their support of the podcast. Home Campus is a platform that you are going to use every single day. Things like scheduling, eligibility, and student athlete clearance. Who doesn't do that every day? Uploading rosters and digital forms, communicating with your coaches, your parents, your kids. Home Campus does it better, does it faster, and it's going to make your life a lot easier. Go to homecampus.com. That's all you got to do. Homecampus.com. You're going to be glad you did. We also want to say thanks to Sideline Interactive, indoor score tables and video boards. Go to sidelineinteractive.com and schedule a live web demo to see their scoreboards and their score tables in action. Probably one of the best purchases I ever made was our Sideline Interactive indoor score table. Of course, we use it for home games, but we also use it for pep rallies, for signing ceremonies. It's tremendously versatile, and their customer service is just outstanding. Go to sidelineinteractive.com and get started. Sidelineinteractive.com.
Yes, home campus is a big part of being an athletic director in Florida. Obviously, they are a sponsor of the FHSAA, but we also use them as our platform for student database. So definitely get on there, be there every day. If you use athletic clearance, it is tremendously helpful to you and to us. So thank you, home campus.
Well, well, thanks so much for sharing that. And again, I've been in Florida since 2000, so I still remember the days before there was any platform, and it was just FHSAA, and then some of the other platforms that came through. And you're absolutely right. Home campus is just fantastic, just for the eligibility part. But then it does so much other stuff. So thanks for giving them that shout out.
Yeah, believe it or not, we've been with home campus since I've been at the association, so at least since 2017. But we still do get forms, eligibility forms that are signed manually, and they will fax them in or email them over, and we're like, oh no, this moved to home campus. Please get in there and do it there.
We were actually fortunate at my schools. We would send an email out to all of our families every year. This is how you create your profile. This is how you update your profile. And again, we were a private school and not dealing with 5,000 students, but it really, really cut down, basically
Yes.
eliminated the paperwork. I would still have to manually upload a couple of families just because they would struggle. But
Mhm.
yeah, you're absolutely right. Folks at home campus are great. For listeners, our guest today is Ashton Mosely. She's the Director of Eligibility and Compliance for the Florida High School Athletic Association. Ashton, Let's go and split this into maybe two parts.
Okay.
This section, let's talk about again, maybe some broad brush strokes. What's your primary job and what are some of the things that you do to help athletic directors and schools not run afoul of an eligibility or a compliance procedure. And then we're going to take a deep dive in our next segment. But what do you do and how does it help athletic directors? I'll phrase it that way.
Okay. Um, so there's actually three of us right now. We're adding a fourth later to the eligibility and compliance department, underneath Justin Harrison. And we all deal with similar things, or we all do a similar job. And then we have some unique abilities in our jobs. So what we do similar is all of the eligibility forms. So your EL2 or your EL6, your EL4, your EL10, your EL11, your EL13. So all of those for like non-traditional, your youth exchange international students, your transfers, and then your eligibility rulings. We all oversee those for certain schools. I am over A through F right now. So if your school starts with an A or through F, I am the eligibility and compliance liaison for those schools. We also all do self-reports and allegations. So whenever we receive those in our office, we deal with the investigations and the sanctioning and all of that through the due process. Um, and then, we answer questions and deal with education. One of the components of my duties is compliance seminar. So we've changed that to where we used to do 2 seminars each summer. Now we're offering 4. It's still in the 2 required sections, but we offer 2 compliance seminar in each of those sections for the summer. But I say that that's my duty, but I also have a lot of help from my team. It is not a one-person job. So that's the gist of it. We answer a lot of phone calls from parents, students, athletic directors, anyone. And a big portion of that is education. So whether it's through compliance seminar or whether it's sending out emails, we have a couple of ideas of how we want to reach different people. But primarily we do mass emails to our schools so that they get familiar with us. And then we try to get out to meetings if we're ever invited, county AD meetings or, at a school. However, we can get in front of people. We love to just get our faces out there so that, everyone can realize this, we're not just people sitting in an office, handing out rulings. We're people too, and we love to help you. We want your kids to be eligible. We want you to succeed. So that's the gist of it.
Yeah, no, and I think you did a really good job with that. And what a lot of folks outside of, let's say, our world, the athletic directors and the FHSAA, because you're right, there is a great partnership with those the seminars, the compliance seminars. I think a lot of, let's say, moms and dads, they think that it's the FHSAA that's just coming up with these rules and these penalties out of thin air. They don't understand that it all comes through coach's recommendation, athletic director advisory council, on up through the principals and the board and everything else, and that it's just your job to enforce the rules that the coaches and the ADs have come up with. Can you share from your experience, let's say a success story where you were able to work with a school and their administration to let's get back on track, and maybe it was something major or maybe it was just a minor thing, but I know you have hundreds and hundreds of these every single year, but can you share one that sticks out for you?
Yeah, there's been a couple. There have been some that they may have missed putting in their kids, they may use athletic clearance, and they missed putting in all of the students on any rosters or getting them cleared. And they'll have a major changeover in staff. So we want to reach out to them and make sure that we're guiding them properly, and making sure they know that, these forms are important, this clearance is important, putting them on a roster is important. So we've had to do that with a couple schools, and we try to work with them as well. We don't want to just find them and say figure it out on your own. We want them to realize that, you need to put a process in place so it doesn't happen again, but we don't want to hurt your athletic program so bad that you can't carry on. So there have been schools where we've had to work with them and we've gotten them on the right track, and, they're doing great. There's also been other instances of just individual student athletes who we realize, there's an issue. They may be living with another student athlete who's like their cousin or something. That was one of the issues that I dealt with this past year. A student athlete was living with, I believe it was his cousin. His uncle was his primary legal guardian. And it, by our rules, was an impermissible benefit, because they didn't go through the proper channels, but they also didn't know. Like the family just thought, they're doing right by the kid. They're picking up where the parents weren't helping the kid out, and he had a really hard home life, and I think that happens a lot that we don't realize, and it's sad to see student athletes suffer. So this uncle was doing what he thought was best, and no one knew that it was breaking a rule. So it came to light, and we advised them, hey, go through sectional appeals, get this approved, and you have a hardship. So ultimately they get to decide whether or not to approve it, but that's the proper way to do it. And they did go that way, and it was approved, and he gets to play, and he still gets to live, with his family that has been his caretaker for years. So I love seeing stuff like that. Like I don't expect these students to know all the rules because I know I didn't. Um, but you do expect the administrators to catch some of these things, and sometimes they don't. A lot of times they don't. But whenever we can go about it the proper way and get those approved, I like to see those feel good stories.
And that's such a great example, having sat on sectional appeals for a number of years. And also, I shared this with Amanda. I was one of three athletic directors that a few years ago we put together a workshop for the FIAAA conference, um, what to do and not do, do's and don'ts of an FHSA appeal. And the people that sit on those committees, they're athletic directors, they're
Mhm.
administrators, and they want to say yes. And that was one of our messages. Give that appeals board reasons to say yes. Complete your paperwork, supply all the documents, be professional, be, courteous, respectful,
Yes.
because they do. They want to grant them when it's possible to do it. And that's a great example of, yeah, it was a rule, but you can appeal that particular rule. Good stuff.
Yes.
Ashton, we're going to do this at the end of the podcast, but if one of our listeners wanted to reach out, either in Florida or even across the nation, pick your brain a little bit about eligibility, compliance, or the Red Book, what's the best way that they can get a hold of you?
Um, I would say email, and we can set up a time for a phone call, because I know email's not always the best way to communicate, and I never mind talking on the phone. However, I know everyone has a big busy schedule, and sometimes it can be hard to get a hold of us if we're, dealing with appeals or have meetings and that kind of stuff. So I'd say initially email, and then let's set up a time where we can get on the phone or get on a Zoom call, or whatever is the best way to communicate for you. But um, email initially, I think, is the easiest. So then I'm usually pretty quick to respond. So
Okay. And
email, it's
go,
you
can you
want me
go
to
ahead and give
provide
out
that
that
email?
email?
That's A Mosley. It's AMOSELEY at FHSAA.org.
Okay. And you can also find Ashley and all the FHSA staff contact information on the FHSA website. So, again, our guest today is Ashton Mosely. We're going to take another break, but we're coming back with more. This is the Educational AD Podcast. We want to say thank you to Hometown Ticketing for their support of the podcast. Hometown Ticketing is the leading digital ticketing provider to schools and colleges. I don't think I need to say anything more, but I'm going to. Go to hometownticketing.com. Their team is going to show you how to set up and sell your tickets online, not just for athletic events, but things like school plays and concerts, school dances, even graduation. And here's the best part. Every school gets assigned a dedicated client success manager that's going to provide you hands-on support every step of the way. That's every step of the way. Go to hometownticketing.com to get started. It's digital ticketing that offers more. We also want to thank Vital Signs Wall of Fame. If you're looking for a really cool way to display your school record boards for all the teams, for all the events, or your school's Hall of Fame, go to vitalsignswalloffame.com. Check out their interactive touchscreen. That's right, touchscreen video consoles. It's also a great way to show off your school's unique history and your proudest moments. Go to vitalsignswalloffame.com. Mention the podcast, you'll get a nice discount. vitalsignswalloffame.com. We'd like to thank Snap Raise for their support. Have you ever spent weeks and weeks with a fundraiser and ended up with little, if any, return on investment? Stop right here. Go to snapraise.com. Hands down, the best online fundraising platform out there. We used it at our school with tremendous success. Our coaches loved it. Our parents loved it. It works. Go to snapraise.com. You can check out their other great platforms, but if you're looking for a fundraiser, you found it. Go to snapraise.com. Welcome back, everyone, to the Educational AD Podcast and our guest, Ashton Mosely, the Director of Eligibility and Compliance with the FHSAA. Ashton, we have listeners in all 50 states and international, and every state has their own high school athletic association. The rules can be different, but I think a lot of the basics are probably the same. And I can speak for the FHSAA. You see your role, and I think you do a great job with it, as education and, helping people stay within compliance, not just a, hey, I got you sort of thing. So you talked about some of the resources and some of the educational steps. I don't think we can mention those enough. So from your perspective, somebody that deals with eligibility and compliance, what are some tools, if you will, that ADs can put in their toolbox that the FHSAA provides?
Well, first and foremost, the Red Book or FHSA handbook, I have it right here. That is one of the most important things to have. It's online, obviously, for people who like their digital materials better. I'm a person who likes a physical book in front of me. I want to be able to highlight it and take notes. So that is number one. Number two is the file library on home campus. Now, this is more for our Florida athletic administrators, not so much all over the states, but we have a file library in home campus, and we have a lot of eligibility resources. So you'll have to scroll down past the sports. It is not alphabetized, which drives me nuts, but it is underneath the sports, and it is eligibility resources. And we have a lot of flow charts, spreadsheets, just different kinds of materials that help with a lot of things. All of our non-traditional types, all of our youth exchange and other immigrant or foreign-born students, there's information up there. You have your allegation and self-report forms there. You have your academic performance contract there, your recruiting course, all kinds of things. So I cannot emphasize enough how important and how helpful that file library can be. So anytime there are questions about those things, you can always reference those sheets. And then if it's something that you deal with every day or often, and it's something that you need help with, we can always create another document and throw it in there if you think it'll be helpful for others. So we are always open to suggestions as well.
Now, I actually got started with the FIAAA, our Athletic Director Association, and then very quickly the NIAAA because of one of the FHSAA's compliance seminars. I had moved in 2008. I'd moved from one school where I'd been the AD and the head football coach for several years to Palmer Trinity School down in Miami. And it was Palmer Trinity's turn for the compliance seminar that had recently been started. And one of the workshops was actually put on by FIAAA. And I said, oh, okay, I'll go ahead and take this. And I just immediately was hooked. But I also remember, and over the years that I've gone to the compliance seminars, either during the summer or through the FIAAA conference, and just the FIAAA staff, or excuse me, the FHSA staff, the FHSA staff was just so, I can't think of another word for it, professional and earnest in their desire to educate and pass that information on. And I want to go back to the success stories. You shared the one about the student living with their cousin or living with their uncle. That's pretty straightforward, at least from my perspective, sitting on eligibility. What's something that was maybe a little more of a deeper dive, and maybe there's uh, you talked about ethics earlier on. And again, not naming names or schools or anything, but can you think of one that as you were working with this, you're just going, oh my goodness, where do we start?
I can think of a couple actually, and it's we've had some where we've gotten questions from schools about transcripts. We deal with a lot of things a lot of times that are in the gray area. So a lot of what we do is, we have to come together as a eligibility and compliance department and talk about things and make sure we're all on the same page and make sure we're all interpreting things correctly or the same way, for consistency purposes. But we've had some transcript questions where, it's been hard to establish a D9 for a student, or, just where they completed their or got some of their education from. So a lot of times we look at it and we're like, this seems cut and dry, but as we dive deeper into it, we're like, wait a second, something wasn't right here. So we've actually had a couple that were not correct transcripts. They were falsified. And it's hard to initially see that because they're presenting something to you and you're like, okay, this looks good, but then you ask more questions and you realize it's not what it seemed. We've had that with physical forms as well. I don't know if, a student may not have been able to get to the doctor in time or what, but we've had some forms that the school brought to us and we're like, this doesn't seem right to us. And we've taken a look at it and been like, you know what, that doesn't seem right to us either. So in those instances, we've advised the school, let's keep them out. For the physical, you don't want they're falsifying information. That would be 365 days of in eligibility if they were to try to participate. But with other, transcripts and stuff like that, that's also falsification. But if there's an error somewhere, we see a lot homeschool students where their parents will declare them as a ninth grader, but they didn't mean to, or they didn't know what ramifications that would have. So the student would still be in eighth grade, but they declared them as a ninth grader a year early. So then, we have to explain to them that it still is not right, and you will still have to go through sectional appeals if you want to play. So there's a lot of gray area and a lot of things that we do. And we usually try to err on the side of caution because we don't want to jeopardize a whole athletic program, a whole team for one student. But we also want to find a way to say yes, like you said earlier. We want to say yes. We don't want to hold you back. But we do have rules that we have to enforce. And that's the hard part. We're trying to find that fine line.
That makes me think of something that happened just this past weekend. I was an official at the Pepsi Relays, the University of Florida. You should know that town well.
Sure do.
And one of our better athletes I've got to know the last couple of years as an official was sharing a concern. So I'm curious if I gave them good advice. Long story short, they've been injured a little bit, sort of a nagging injury, and they expressed a concern about meeting the minimum number of athletic competitions to allow them to compete at the district track meet. Obviously, it's a track and field athlete. And what I shared with them was that their athletic director, not the coach, needs to communicate with the FHSAA, specifically, the administrator in charge of track and field. Let them know of the situation. Let them know that you're getting treatment, supplying documentation of, doctor visits, physical therapy visits, et cetera, and that in the past at my school, we had a situation with a soccer athlete similarly that I think we ended up meeting the minimum number of games, but we might have missed it by one. But because we had been proactive in that particular case, our athlete was allowed to compete. So did I direct this young athlete in the right way?
Yes, I would say to always communicate with our office if you have any questions ever. Either the sport administrator or somebody is willing to help. But in that instance, the sport administrator, Ed Thompson, he would be able to let the school know what would be needed to get a waiver of that, if any. Um, those are issues that our sport administrators deal with. They are the ones who provide the waivers for minimum contest requirements. So if there is a medical issue and there is documentation of it, that would be something that Ed could look at and decide if this is sufficient, and then get it going. I do know that individual sports are a little different than team sports whenever it comes to qualifying for the state series. So that would probably be something that he would have to consider. But always be in communication with us, especially with something like that.
All right. Well, hopefully I steered him in the right direction. And
It sounds like you
yeah.
did.
Well, Ashton, this has just been so cool. I'm going to say reconnecting because we used to see each other maybe once or twice a year.
Yeah.
But we're not done yet. We always wrap up with what we call the athletic director's toolbox. Now,
Okay.
you're not an AD, but you certainly know your way around the world of athletics. So we're going to take our final break
Okay.
and hear from Athletic Surveys by Lifetrack, who sponsored this segment. When we come back, I'm going to challenge you to send out a brand new athletic director on their very first job, but I'm only going to let you put 3 things in their toolbox. So let's take that
Okay.
break. And when we return, we're going to see what Ashton Mosely of the FHSAA is going to put in her new athletic director toolbox. We'll be right back. We want to say thanks to Athletic Surveys for sponsoring the AD Toolbox segment. Athletic surveys are about connections. They're going to connect you probably with some people you already hear back from, the complainers, the ones that want to gripe about everything. But that's only a small percentage of your stakeholders. Athletic surveys will also connect you with the 98% that supports your program. And that's tremendously valuable information to have when you're talking with a frustrated parent or student athlete, or maybe your principal, or even your school board. Go to athleticsurveys.com. They're going to create a custom survey that lets you take the pulse of everybody in your program. That's athleticsurveys.com. Well, it's that time of the podcast. We've been visiting today with an old friend, Ashton Mosely, the Director of Eligibility and Compliance for the Florida High School Athletic Association. Has a tremendous background in athletics, but right now I'm going to challenge her to send out a brand new AD on the very first job, but I'm only going to let her put 3 things in the toolbox. So, Ashton, what 3 items are going to go into your new athletic director toolbox?
Well, if you are an athletic director in the state of Florida, my number one item for you is the red handbook, whether it be a physical copy or the digital copy that's on FHSAA.com. That is, the basis of all of our rules and regulations. So that one to me is very, very important. My second tool would be a network of reliable colleagues or just contacts that you can collaborate with, you can communicate with, and bounce ideas off of, that you can ask questions to. And whether that be your county AD, whether it be, ADs at your fellow schools, whether it be someone or a few someone's in our office, just have those people that you can count on and that you're comfortable talking to and asking questions with. I have a few ADs who call me for everything. And they're not first time ADs, but they have questions, and I love being that person that they feel comfortable with. So I think it's really important to have others that you can rely on and just collaborate with freely. Um, my next tool would be an emergency action plan. Um, you, we live in a crazy world. Things happen all the time, whether it's, the actions of someone else or an accident. Things happen. So it's good to have a plan for when these things happen and be able to execute them. You can't make someone execute a plan, but you can prepare them and make sure they know what they're supposed to do. How they act under pressure is up to them, but you can prepare them for that. So that one's really important. For safety, that's the priority. You want to keep your student athletes safe, your coaches, your fellow administrators, your fans, everyone, officials. So I think that's pretty important. And then can I add one more?
Absolutely. For you, we're going to let you add one.
My last one would be a tool for clearance for athletics. So whether you use home campus athletic clearance, whether you use Activate or you have a spreadsheet or something, just a way to determine who can participate, who has what forms, who needs what forms. This is a safety issue as well. Your physicals and your consent and release forms are not only are they safety, but they're also big for liability. So you want to make sure that your kids are not only academically eligible, but they are athletically eligible as well. So a plan for clearance. And I think those are my 4.
Okay. No, and you can keep going if you want to, but those those are great tools. I mean, all of them are great. I love the networking part, of course, but we've been doing this now for closing in on 4 years, and we've had over 2,000 tool suggestions. Now, some have been repeated, but
Wow.
you are the first person to ever mention specifically the emergency action plan. People have alluded to it in other tools about organization, but you were the first one to give it its own standing. And it's such an important part of any athletic director's organizational toolkit, if you will. So thanks so much for sharing all of those tools.
I
Great stuff.
I will have to say that the emergency action plan, that's something that when we go to provisional visits for our provisional schools that we tell them, those are like some of their best practices. So that comes from that. And I believe J.A. Colasanti is the one who gives that little spiel. It comes from that, but to me, that is, safety is always a priority for all of us. We're here for the kids, but we want to keep everyone safe. And if we can't keep them safe, then they don't want to, parents aren't going to trust us. Um, fans aren't going to trust us. So I think, that's always something that should be at the top of our list. Something we should always be thinking about and thinking how we can improve our plans. And, so yeah, that wasn't just me, but I
Well,
don't want to
we're
take a lot
glad
of
that
credit.
we're glad that you shared it, though. Ashton, this has just been so cool. One more time, if one of our listeners wants to reach out, pick your brain a little bit more, whether it's about the Red Book or just about, anything athletic wise, how can they get a hold of you?
Yeah, I'm always available by email. It's A Mosley, AMOSELEY at FHSAA.org. I'm also available for phone calls or Zoom, but it's easier to email me first and set that up.
Okay. Well, Ashton, thanks again for spending some time with us and our listeners today, and all the best moving forward with spring sports.
Yes, thank you for having me. It's been fun. And good luck to all of you with spring sports and the rest of the school year.
Okay. For our listeners, we do appreciate you tuning in. And just a reminder, we upload the video recordings of all of our interviews to the Educational AD Podcast YouTube channel. We do this just about every day with new content and best practices. So come back next time for more great information on the Educational AD Podcast.